Right, we're rolling. On this podcast, we'll be talking about different areas of business and all things marketing. My name is Dave Doyle.
And I'm Dave Alton. This is Social Antics, another marketing podcast.
Today on the show, we are joined by Paul Stenson from the Charleville Lodge Hotel in Dublin, or more notably, the White Moose Cafe. Paul has been renowned for his Outrage marketing, which has allowed him to build a global brand from Dublin's north side. Paul, welcome to Social Antics. How are you keeping?
A very good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
We're disturbing your holiday.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Excuse me, as you might hear me munch on a bag of potatoes here. Is that okay? Am I allowed to eat while we
That's all right. He gives out to me for drinking fizzy drinks during it, so I'm now going to drink fizzy drinks as well. So it's all the one to me, to be honest with you.
What's your drink of choice, Dave?
This is a Lucozade Orange, is what this is
I like that.
at the moment. Lucozade Orange.
So I take it the two of you are Corkonians, are you?
I'm from Wexford originally.
I am from Cork, yeah.
Pure Cork here beside me.
Okay. And where are you?
We're in Cork City, literally just outside the city at the moment.
As you can see from the backdrop, which the listeners obviously can't see, there's loads of coffee behind. So we're in his factory, basically, where they make the coffee.
You make coffee, do you?
We do. I work for a coffee roasters here in Cork, Velo Coffee Roasters. So
brilliant.
We're up in the roastery here at the moment. So this is our fancy studio.
Nice. It looks very good. And Velo, haven't heard of it.
So
Well, you're not doing a very good fucking job then, Dave, are you?
Yeah, a small artisan roaster here from Cork. We supply into Aldi, Dunn's, Tesco, and Tesco is the most recent one. So growing business, going well.
Very good. But here, isn't it all about the barista? If you know,
you can make the best coffee, but if you have a shit barista, it's going down the drain, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. Isn't it all in the barista, really? How good a coffee will be when you not when you're, because you're selling to Lidl, so you're kind of retail as opposed to selling in a cafe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we sell into the big ones, and Tesco, Dunn's, and Aldi. But what way do you go about when you're looking for staff? Would you have that kind of process of get in there and make me a coffee, or would you trust in the CV, if that makes sense?
I generally know if somebody is suitable within the first 30 seconds of seeing them. Generally speaking, I don't place any value in a CV. I'd rather somebody come in and, as I said, now that may sound very superficial, or it may sound like judging a book by its cover, but generally speaking, I like to follow my gut. And when you see somebody, you kind of can tell whether they're going to work out or not. So that's kind of the strategy we use. Very difficult to get staff these days. Very, very difficult in the hospitality business.
You have 2 locations now, don't you? So
three.
Sorry.
But I think continuing on the PUP when indoor dining has reopened is a bit silly, because like, who's going to want to go back working in indoor dining when they can sit on their arse at home for $3.50 a week without doing a tap? I just don't understand why it hasn't been cut off.
It's very interesting to hear that now, because I don't know if you've seen on Twitter there now the last, I suppose about 2 weeks or so thereabouts, some other well-renowned entrepreneurs, so I know Pat Phelan and Mr. Cosgrove have been basically saying people giving out about not being able to hire staff. It's absolute nonsense. If you pay people properly, then you're going to get good staff. Now, I would contend hospitality is a totally different ballgame to tech or other kind of sectors. What's your kind of take on what they are saying, I suppose?
Well, we will always pay fairly good wages. We don't go as far down as minimum wage. I do agree that the hospitality industry is in general a lower paid gig, but in the White Moose certainly we go way above the minimum wage. So like, and that's what my post that kind of went viral fairly recently enough stated. just to advise everybody that if they are applying to the White Moose, we do pay way above minimum wage, because I do agree, and I kind of empathize with, or sympathize, or whatever the word is, with people, and I understand, if I was being paid $3.50 a week and I could get something similar for sitting on my couch watching Netflix, I'd probably just sit on my couch watching Netflix. So, but the reason it is hard to get that's a kind of a sideline issue. I don't know. I can't understand why the government would not, when society reopens, like, why continue the PUP for the sectors that are available, to work in, like hospitality. Okay, somebody who works in a theater, maybe. I can understand there how the PUP might continue for them while theaters and that are closed. But for hospitality and other construction and all that kind of stuff that has reopened and is back on its feet, why in God's name are we still giving the PUP to them?
So I know one of my buddies there, he's an economist inside, and he goes, I know economists get it wrong more times than they get it right often, but he basically says that people don't realize there's a crash coming here because we are handing out money left, right, and center, and someone has to pay for it sometime. They always do, always do.
And they will pay for it. They'll be given hefty taxes down the road. I think it's starting next year, isn't it?
Something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself any bit tax expert or anything like that. But on that, and again, it speaks to what you've achieved in terms of growing your brand. Like, no one really would think of advertising a job in hospitality when the whole hospitality industry is shut down. Now, you were making a valid point whilst you were doing it. And that's, I suppose, what I would call the uniqueness in what you're doing. A lot of people would just say, oh, there's Paul and he's shouting at Twitter again. Whereas in actuality, with a lot of stuff that you do, there's a point behind it and it's conveyed in a way that actually makes sense and that actually resonates with people.
Yeah. Well, what we do is we try and, I guess, use humor to convey a very serious underlying message. And if humor was not present, the underlying message would not be heard. So whether it's us saying to gluten intolerant people who are suffering from a psychological disorder as opposed to a physiological one, because you're only really gluten intolerant if you're celiac, but less than 1% of the population are actually celiac. So the other kind of 34% of people who demand gluten-free food in restaurants because Felicity and Holland and Barrett told them that they'd lose weight. When I did say that we require a doctor's note for gluten-free food, it did, it was trying to tell people, look, if you're celiac, we will look after you. We will do whatever we can to accommodate your needs. But here, if you're gluten intolerant and you think you suffer from something that science says you don't have, well, then you need your head examined and you can feck off and cop on and eat normal food like everybody else. And then there was the time that we said we'd shoot vegans dead. And then there was the time we said we'd put Valium in the fruit juice of screaming babies. All of these are funny. Obviously, they're not true, but they all have a message that we'd like to convey to our customers. And that is, if your child is screaming his fucking block off, shut him up or get out, And if you're a vegan and you look at us as if we've 100 heads when there aren't 10,000 items on our menu to suit your idiosyncratic dietary requirements, all of these controversies that we've been involved in, there is a message. And rarely do we get asked for gluten-free food now. Rarely do you hear screaming babies.
I actually have it here. I heard you talk before about that you condition the behavior of your customers, and I thought that was a great line. And I've worked in hospitality before, and I've worked in bars, restaurants, clubs, and I just thought if I knew now what, or if I knew then what I know now from what you're saying, it would have changed. I just think that was a great line, that you condition the behavior of them.
We condition our customers to behave in a certain way, and we use humor to do that. Because at the end of the day, I value our team, and if our team are happy, so too are our customers. All it takes is one miserable fuck of a customer to get our staff down, and when a staff member is down, obviously that's going to transfer across onto the customers. So humor is, but what it also does, guys, is it means that all of the seats in the cafe are occupied by people who don't take life too seriously, who kind of know how to have a laugh every now and then. And funnily enough, the number of complaints we've received has drastically reduced since I started doing what I do.
I find that's one thing that I read, because I'm of the opinion now that marketing in general is boring, right? If you look at one of they're hailed as some of the best marketers in the world is Heineken, right? They've just launched Island's Edge. No one knows anything about it. Everyone's confused by what is it, what's it there for, what's going on. No, it's all boring. What you've done, and what I'm surprised why a kind of a franchise or someone hasn't tried to do similar, is why they haven't taken your approach, which is, and I'm not going to just say not being politically correct, but just being kind of thinking what a lot of people are thinking and expressing that in a certain way, which is through humor. Why a kind of a bigger brand, a bigger kind of a global franchise or an international franchise, hasn't taken that as their brand strategy and kind of rolled it out everywhere and appealed to that population? Or are we living in an age now where chief marketing officers, investors, CEOs are just terrified of cancel culture? They're terrified of the very, very loud minority, or whatever you want to class them as. Because what you've done has clearly worked. So therefore, taking that and applying it in a global context or to a bigger brand, you could think that would work as well, and it would be very, very appealing.
Yeah, you used the word terrified. I was going to say scared. I think that the larger companies, they're aware of the climate in which we live in nowadays, and that is the political correct climate, where cancel culture is rife. And there is a very loud minority of people, specifically on Twitter. I don't really go near Twitter anymore. That will literally cancel you and for telling a joke, because one person finds it offensive when 99 people find it funny. It's all about that one person these days, the one person who takes offense. We have to pander to their needs only. They're just scared. But I always think that to have a strategy like we do, you have to be two things: A, brave, and B, mad. And with bigger companies like that, and I think Heineken is great, and there are a few companies whose advertising I think is on point. Heineken is one of them. Specsavers is another. Let me think. It'll come to me.
Paddy?
Yeah. They're since the beginning. Yeah. Paddy Power. Yeah. They're good. But none of them are kind of almost pushing the boat out. They're not kind of coming up to that line that we dare not cross. They're kind of staying way.
It's almost like that line of the only word that kind of comes is almost like that individual personal insult, if that makes sense. It's not just a time or an event or something that's going on.
I would never use the word insult.
No, that's what I was trying to find a better word, but it's that kind of personalized.
Remember that nothing that we do is intended to be offensive, because offense is not given, it's taken. Right? We don't ever set out to offend anybody. But we're very happy that people choose, that's the operative word, choose to be offensive to something that the vast majority of people find funny. And that brings us on to a more, I suppose, a deeper point, and that is, a lot of people are seeing the world through a prism of offense taking, and this whole political correctness. And I think we wonder why there's such a problem with depression in this world these days, when people are actively seeking to be offended. You get me? Why can't people just kind of just have a laugh and see the funny side? I personally don't get it. There are people out there who make it their business to be offended. And they like, there's people who would not follow the White Moose, and they don't follow on a daily basis what we do. And then all of a sudden I do something that is controversial, and they land in then just because it suits them, just at that time, to give out. You know, they're not following us on a day-to-day basis. Oh, but Paul has done this, over, let's lambaste him. We don't follow them normally, and I think that's very, I don't like that, to be honest with you.
But when people take offense in all these cases, it's always lacking content and it's lacking context. So if you take yourselves, for example, I'm not promoting here, I'm just again to give the overall picture. You could also argue that, okay, Paul has said that and you're offended by it, just to take that as a side point. Paul's also employed X amount of staff through the whole pandemic and paid them. He's also, I know you've done stuff with Dublin Zoo, and you do a lot of stuff with the dog shelters, I believe, as well. So there's all this good stuff going on as well. But of course, that's all put to one side because you said one thing. And I think that's there was a comedian a number of years ago, I can't remember who it was, but they basically said that my career is already over, not because of a joke that I'm going to tell, but because of a joke that I told in the past.
20 years ago.
Which is going to be dug up because now, again, without context, it's taken out. And I think that's, again, like what you were saying there, that's why people are kind of constantly walking on eggshells, for want of a better word. And again, humor is a very, very difficult thing to, humor is taken, right? Humor is based on context. You go to a gig to have a laugh. You watch a gig on YouTube because you want to enjoy it. You don't watch something because you want to feel angry emotions after it. You know what I mean? So again, I think that's an important point to make.
100%. But people, and it's because of the online world, and Twitter has a large part to play in it. But you're so right. You know, you are judged, as you said, on one thing you say 20 years ago, despite all the good that you might do. But people don't want to. When people are talking, when the Twitter Atsi, are talking about Paul Stenson, they don't. It's not in their agenda to talk about the good I do, nor does good news really travel fast. But it's zoning in on one particular thing, completely disregarding everything else, and exaggerating it to the point. And by the way, a lot of people on Twitter will believe anything they read on the internet, and a lot of people will take hearsay and believe it as fact on Twitter. That's just another thing I wanted to say. But I think it's kind of sad. It is very, very sad, the times we're living in where this kind of stuff is going on. And, okay, I've now got 3 businesses. We employ over 50 people, and I've created employment for these people. I've put bread and milk on the tables of their families, blah, 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 blah. But still people want to cancel me. And that shows a complete lack of, a complete disregard for the people that we employ in the White Moose as well. And so I think these people who speak negatively about Paul Stenson are quite selfish, as well as miserable. But at the same time, we are very grateful for them, because if it weren't for the offense takers, if it weren't for the miserable Twitterazzi with absolutely nothing better to do than, sit on Twitter all day, negatively criticizing Paul Stenson or the White Moose, if it weren't for them, the White Moose wouldn't be the global brand that it is. So what we've done, I suppose, is we've used these people without having to pay them anything, to get our name out to a global audience. So deep down, I'm very grateful for these people, although I do kind of feel sorry for them.
They're a great sales. They're a great sales team.
Great.
Well,
sales.
They are. Anyone
one of those
word about you for without having to pay them, I would regard it as great salespeople. Yeah,
it's almost like that. And I was looking beforehand. I was kind of thinking, how do you even define outrage marketing? Because just saying it makes people angry is too simplistic, right? And I was kind of thinking that it's basically goading people to the point where they're emotionally incapable of not engaging with your business. Do you know what I mean? You get them to that point where they can't just ignore you. They have to get involved in the conversation. And that's where you mentioned, I think the phrase you used was going to the edge. You can't get people to that point if you don't go to the edge, right? And you're getting them to the point whereby they know you're making a joke. Probably a lot of them do, but they still can't help themselves. And that's the trick, right? That's the marketing trick.
Well, you've people who know my game, and they know what I'm at. But then you have the newcomers who kind of will see that a cafe in Dublin has said this, and the sense of entitlement kicks in because everybody is, when they think of a cafe, it's like, this is a cafe who serves coffees, and I am better than that. And how dare they speak like that? And who do they think they are? And that's why, that's another, I suppose, strong point for us. But I'm very happy. I'm very happy. Let's just put it that way. I'm very happy.
You seem very happy. You seem very content.
Very happy that these people exist, But it's the newbies who kind of well, then you'll have people who know what I'm at and they still go and talk shite,
You mentioned a few minutes ago about when we were talking about other brands and what they do, and you mentioned that your strategy. In your eyes, how much of it is strategy, if that makes sense? How much is actually, I know, look, things happen off the cuff, some stuff might be planned, but how much in your head do you feel is a strategy?
None of it. None of it.
You don't have a big marketing calendar on the wall?
No. My pictures of my dogs on the wall. I could sit here in front of you guys and all your listeners and say, oh, I was scheming and plotting and planning for years, and
waiting for a vegan
outrage marketing beast upon the world. But no, it kind of happened by chance. And indeed, anytime I do put up a post, it's always spontaneous. I'm a great believer in spontaneity, and I'm a great believer, like when I'm doing my Instagram stories, I have this rule whereby the first take is it. You don't do it twice, because that's the most authentic and it's the most kind of natural. And like, you have all these other bloggers, go again, no, go again, and they take like 252 photos before they actually end up posting one. So yeah, the outrage marketing strategy is non-existent. It's just me kind of winging it, really, to be honest with you. And that's just the truth. Something happens and I post about it. But if that thing didn't happen, I wouldn't have posted about it. So, and I suppose when you're running a business like ours, every interaction with a customer is kind of usable content. Now, that doesn't mean if Mary comes in and orders an Americano and Ramesh serves, we'll put that
not viral.
No, it's like, and it's usually when people are being negative towards us in some way. Like, I always think that I equate what I do to like Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid. So as we all know, the philosophy behind karate is defense rather than attack. And that's exactly the way I would view our outrage marketing. We never set out to attack anybody, but I will defend the cafe. So if people write a negative TripAdvisor review, which could potentially damage the reputation of the cafe, then in turn put it out of business, I will robustly defend it, because we're employing over 50 people. So so that's an important point that I think needs to be made as well, that I don't set out. Everyone thinks, Paul Stenson is this bully, he's this prick, he's a misogynist, and he's a racist and a xenophobe and all these words, because he attacks people and he calls them out. And no, I will not willy-nilly just call somebody out unless there's a reason to do it. You get me?
You mentioned spontaneity there, which is in my absolute sense. So given all of that you've just said, and it's all a fair point, well made.
Yeah.
Given that it's all on the cuff, has there been many, or is there a few times you've gone, fuck, probably, not even that you didn't mean to say it, but it just came out in the wrong way, or you communicated it in a way that you were like, probably just tipped over the line?
No, I no, never. I'm kind of excited about that potentially happening one day. I do know how to. I kind of know how to play the game. You know, I know where that line is. I'm pushing it constantly. Really, it's, I suppose, about like as time goes by. You know, the way we kind of say to ourselves, "Oh, geez, if I'd done that 10 years ago, I wouldn't get away with it." You know, something I might have done. But if I did it now, I wouldn't get away with it, because as times are changing, people are getting more and more politically correct and more offended. So something I might do today might kind of be, you know, laughed at or brushed off, but in 5 years' time, Jesus, I could be put in jail for it or something. Do you get me? That's the way things are going. But no, I don't think I've ever. I can never kind of, like, the stuff that I've said that a lot of people would think I shouldn't have said. But as far as I'm concerned, no, there's nothing I have done in the past that I regret. And I always learn from what I do. Usually the regrets I have is not making the post long enough or not adding in that. But no, in general, no, there's nothing that I kind of regret doing.
You mentioned the word blogger. We've often chatted here about the whole influencer world, and we were talking about a certain Irish retailer selling influencer kits, basically teaching kids, giving them a tripod and a ring light,
and say this is all you need this is what you need to be an influencer.
We've
personality.
We've spoke loads here about that kind of going into that field, and I've even heard friends of mine telling me that there's kids in schools, some of them are teachers, and they're saying that kids are wanting to go down, I want to be an influencer when I grow up. Like, what is your whole thoughts on people even looking or entering that whole world? Like, you know, I don't think you can become one, if that makes sense. You can't make yourself become one.
We've said it before. If you go out and say you're an influencer, you're not an influencer. What you are is you're a great photographer. Or in your case, I would imagine, I'm not saying that you're an influencer, but I'm saying you would say you're a very, very good performer. And I've heard you before talking about you kind of wanted to be on TV, I think, when you were younger. And that kind of comes out now in some of the stuff that you do now, but you have a talent for it. And you can, again, you say there, you can be spontaneous, you can contextualize things quite intelligently, but then communicate them in a very, very humorous manner. So that's a talent. Whereas a lot of people go, I want to be an influencer. That's not a fucking thing.
They make money.
That's a thing.
Oh. Yeah, okay. Firstly, I have an issue with the word influencer. I have a serious issue with the word influencer. Like, I mean, I don't think. I think persuasion is much more powerful if it's organic. Imagine going out and calling yourself an actual influencer. Anybody who wants to be an influencer, well, look, each to their own, and off with them, and the best of luck to them. But, you know, I don't know. I think, and this is going to sound maybe, well, it's honest. You will do well on Instagram if you're pretty. If you have pretty privilege, you will do well on Instagram. You're frozen on me, lads.
No, we're still here.
Dave does great on Instagram, in fairness.
I've got no posts.
Imagine the two of you do very well on Instagram. But if you are pretty, you will do well on Instagram. All right? And that's the way it is. People, you know, it's like Instagram is almost like a peep show, you know? It's like it's like very conducive to kind of voyeurism and stuff like that. Instagram, you will do well if you are pretty, if you're ripped, if you're a guy, and if you're, you know, if you have a nice arse, if you're a woman and you wear tight leggings and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I will say. You'll see, you know, have you ever seen a huge Instagram star that isn't good looking? Huge? Not really. Or have you?
I think.
Put us on the spot there. There's definitely loads of them.
So, but in terms of, look, yeah, I kind of feel mildly sorry for anybody whose life achievement would be to become an influencer.
Do you think though
Uh,
that says something more about, and this is probably getting a little bit more deep rooted, but that says more about, like, that's more of a reflection, because everything that's positive or everything that's communicated online is ultimately a reflection of society in some way, right? And you use the word influence, like the word influencer is in the title. Like the genius of advertising back in the day was that people didn't see it as advertising, or it was subtle, shall we say, and therefore it influenced people over time, subconsciously, if nothing else. The fact that like everyone talks about influencers and there's influencer kits, and a lot of people kind of demonize influencers and they say, oh no, influencers are bad, but yet they are still influenced by these people. And we can ramble, we've done it loads of episodes, we've rambled off the stats around teen suicide and depression, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, like, there is negative, very, very negative connotations coming from these social media platforms, be it Instagram or otherwise. And everyone knows it, and yet society hasn't, like, almost learned, for want of a better word. There's the kind of almost no cop on there. And I think that's a very, very fascinating topic, shall we say, that we all know that it's there. We all know the big lie.
I think,
but yet people buy into it.
People are getting better in terms of understanding. They're getting better to, looking for the background, looking for the stories. They just understand a bit more. But as you said, they're still being influenced.
Even though it's advertising, it's still influenced by it.
They're still being influenced by it.
But I do think the point you make about, the suicides and all that, I think that's a very important point to make. And, Instagram is all about, oh, look what I have, and look how great I am because I have this, and look where I am. It's a platform for gloating, and it's a platform for showing off how beautiful one's body is and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I think people have a tendency in this day and age to compare themselves to these influencers, and which makes them feel very, very inadequate in themselves, which, yes, leads to, it could be another reason why we're all kind of depressed and feeling unworthy and, that kind of stuff. So that's why I think, if you're going to compare yourself to anybody, compare yourself to yourself yesterday as opposed to anybody online. And I like that narrative.
That's interesting. That's an interesting
quote.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
Because these beautiful pics of people out in Ibiza or whatever, and their perfect bodies, and which are filtered, which are not real.
Yeah.
Which are not real at all. They're filtered and they're face tuned and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I think it is one of the reasons why our young people's mental health is possibly not as good as it should be.
And you talking about mental health there, something we've talked about as well. Social media is literally, it's a drug, it's addictive. And you've spoken before about, kind of taking a break, we'll say, from social media. And like, how important is it for, not just regular day-to-day consumers, someone that has a phone, but like, even take the three of us, for example, people that are working in social media as well, that are literally, it's their job to be on social media, do people forget about them sometimes as well? How important is it to actually take that mental break and pause from social media?
I would think it's very important, or else, I would be addicted to social media, because I'm an addict and I'm in recovery, and I think I've replaced my alcohol addiction with social media, and I don't think it's too healthy, but at the same time, it's not really doing me any damage. When I removed drink out of my life, like, there's nothing that I could ever do that was as damaging. Nothing can go wrong anymore as long as drink isn't part of my life anymore. There's nothing that I can do that will be wrong. Do you get me? Because drink is such a huge burden and such a huge. It was just like it was the biggest problem I've ever had. So nothing else is as problematic as that, and nothing ever will be. So social media, I suppose, is the lesser of two evils, and I am addicted to it. I think when you have an addictive personality, you just have to be careful. But you do need to switch off. And I'll never forget, there was one time I went into Tesco and I bought a €15 phone, just like a burner phone, with no
a block,
a block, and like all it did was call and send texts. But I put down the smartphone for about a week, and I just had that, and I was free. But then I kind of realized, well, hang on, the reason the appointment is still so well forever. So yeah, but I do think people need to tread quite carefully because every time you get a like or a comment or whatever, you get that hit of dopamine, and it's like highly addictive, and it's worrying that so many kind of 12-year-olds are going around with a phone kind of cemented into the palm of their hand. And they're growing up like this, with this hit of dopamine for every like they get and all that kind of stuff. Pat Phelan has a cup. Pat obviously is in the same club as me, and he often has this cup that says "No good will come of social media." You know the way he puts it.
Yeah.
And and I kind of sometimes think to myself, well, my business is built on it, but I hear you at the same time. It's by no means perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, Paul, like you've had your battles, you've had your journeys running big businesses, well able obviously to take criticism or turn that criticism into something positive. But I think again, the fundamental problem, and I'm not saying that people in adulthood don't have issues with social media, but I think the problem with kids in particular is that when you're developing, you take, in social psychology, you talk about something called a self-concept. And when yourself is meant to be very, very relational and finding out who you are and making friends and your family is important and so on and so forth, that is then translated into a more quantified self, where it's how many likes. And likes are nothing. You can't hang your coat on it. You can't do anything with a like. And it gets to the point whereby someone would rather have 20 likes from people growing up who are in another class to them, for example, rather than having a friend saying you did good in that, or whatever the story is. Your dog is lovely. And I think that's the kind of that development stage, I think, is something that we're not going to know about for a long time in terms of how damaging it's going to be. But you can see with certain people, definitely are just struggling constantly. And it's a hidden struggle as well, right? Albeit it is open because it's public, it's in social media, which I think is, again, a very, very insidious part of the whole kind of dilemma, shall we say.
And, I suppose your existence on social media is not real. And just on that, like, it was my birthday there in June, and I'm flooded with messages from people I've never met and I never will meet saying happy birthday, and like hundreds, if not thousands, of messages are coming in, and like my true friends that I can count on one or two hands, their messages get lost in this sea of kind of well wishes from strangers. And having a following like I do isn't always great. Like it's like and like being recognized in public isn't always great, and that's why I often would listen to Blind Boy, and that's why he wears the black bag over his face, because he wants to go into Lidl and not have anybody be part of that part of the process of buying a pair of jocks, I think is what he said, or something like that. And I really kind of can relate to that. So it's not a true existence, and Twitter and all this is a false reality that we are thinking is real, and we're getting very tied up in it, and it's kind of dangerous, I think. And so just in case you think that oh, isn't it great? Paul Stenson has like 60,000 Instagram followers, or 100 on the White Moose, or 200 on the White Moose Facebook. Or no, isn't he? Oh, he must be. It's not always good. No, it's not always good at all. I and sometimes I just love to kind of, I don't know, walk into town and go into a shop, and I don't know.
What I'd be interested to hear is, so you talked there about switching off from social media. Social media is such a huge part of the business, being recognized. When you say, for example, you're over in Ackle now, when you put up something, say that you're inside in the cafe, or the opposite, you're over on holidays, do you actually, if it makes sense now, do you actually see that take a reflection in the till, if that makes sense? Will you actually see people at certain times of the year where maybe something controversial is going on that you're after putting out? Will you see people come to the cafe with a chance of maybe seeing, because you put out that you are there, building that? It's not just the White Moose Cafe, it's not just the logo, it's actually the face behind the brand as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. And funnily enough, you do notice a dip in sales when I'm away, and
that's what I mean. You're away for the week now, or whatever. Like, as people, I'll go in next week, he might be back.
Yeah, you do. And I'm not just saying that to blow my own trumpet or anything, but it is fact. And like whenever there's a big controversy, like, I don't know, anything. See, my strongest platform would be Facebook, because I like writing, and whenever I write something that has been spread widely by the masses, you will notice an immediate impact on sales the next day. But it's not always the next day. Like, could be a week later or a month later. You will notice a surge just after something I've done happened. Viral. But you might think now, well, hang on, Paul hasn't done anything in recent times. Well, there hasn't been anything to do in recent times. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a number of different aspects to the social media I run. So the Facebook, 205,000 followers or something like that. I come across as possibly quite a prick, because of the words I write. And you don't see, I suppose, the humanity behind it. You just see the black and white words. And whereas if I'm on my Instagram story explaining what I've just written on Facebook, you'll kind of see, he's not that bad, actually. He's kind of sound. But so you have the Facebook following, right? And then you'd have, let's say, my personal Instagram following, and they're actually there's a bit of an overlap, but they're actually quite different because of the content I produce on each of the different platforms. And Snapchat was the same. With Snapchat is obviously gone now. I don't use Snapchat, but the Paul Stenson who writes "All vegans will be shot" on Facebook, is perceived differently to the Paul Stenson on Snapchat. The Snapchat story say, "Jesus, I'll shoot those vegans if they come in." Because do you know what I mean? When you read something, you're taking it as fact, but when you see me say it, you kind of see the humor in it. Do you get me? So
when someone says sarcasm never comes across in text form, you can't be sarcastic on WhatsApp. It's impossible. You just can't do it. And that's why they created emojis, basically.
Yeah. True.
When you take up your phone, personally, which of the apps do you find yourself straight away at nowadays going towards?
It's a very personal question.
The social media apps would say.
What do I use? WhatsApp probably usually, if that's not a social media app. Okay, well, I just look at let's just take a snapshot of my screen at the moment. Okay, so we have the first app that's coming up is Instagram, then TikTok, then WhatsApp, and Instagram again, WhatsApp again, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. So there you go.
So I suppose that we've talked about here loads of times that we're just getting some, like, TikTok is the only one that's really broken through with something a little bit different.
It's
that
new.
they're all
it's
getting
not boring anymore.
Boring, really, if that makes sense. There's nothing really breaking through. So that's what I was interested to see. like what one do you find yourself gravitating towards? You know, is there a standout one for you?
Well, I'd say both Instagram would be the one I use most. When I'm doing the stories. Facebook, less so. Sorry, I'm just looking at, I'm down in Achill, as you know, and I'm looking at the CCTV here in the office of my two big Dobermans. Doberman? Do you call it two Doberman?
Doberman, I would say.
Doberman.
Yeah.
But no, in Cork we actually get rid of that letter. It's just Doberman.
Doberman.
The M and the N kind of blend together.
Okay. So yeah, and my father has just walked up the driveway there. I'm just wondering why he's doing that. Are they because like we've large railings, but one of them has escaped before. Other grand.
So this will be an exclusive.
Yeah. But here, Dobermans are not the way Hollywood paints them to be. They're like, they'll lick you to death, to be honest with you. The way they're bred nowadays, they're not going to know. If someone broke into the house, it might be a different story, but they're not.
I wouldn't cross them, I'd say.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
They're certainly not the vicious killers that they're made out to be. But sorry, where were we before that?
No, you mentioned your dad there actually. We were talking about it there before we came on.
That was some segue.
It was some segue. I'm getting better of it each week. You can tell we're true professionals here, Paul. You mentioned your dad, and you know that you obviously took over the hotel from them. And to me, like when you hear the Charleville Lodge Hotel, you know, it sounds nice and grand and nice and we'd say posh. You know, when you came in, did you make a mess of that, or you know how was that transition of taking over from your parents?
Total bollocks of it.
Total bollocks of
it. No, I would think that I probably I would like to think I might have enhanced it, you know, but no, my parents are both in their like mid-70s now, and so they would have bought Charleville Lodge in 1994, and I was 14 back then, and I took over in 2003, having worked in the Marion Hotel having been fired from the Marion Hotel in Dublin. Prior to that, I guess my time in the Marion was, well, I'll be honest with you, I was drinking my way through it, and like I would only be able to deal with customers if I had knocked back a Bacardi and Coke at about 8:30 in the morning, and that's the harsh reality of it. But I was fired from the Marion anyway, and then all of a sudden, see, like with 5-star hotels, the customers are absolute and utter dickheads. Yeah. Because it's a 5-star environment. They come in and they start clicking their fingers at you and like,
they're entitled before they walk in the door. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're there to be seen as much as, you know, for any other reason. And like they're posers, and like the real rich actually are the most unassuming people. It's the fake rich, the people who haven't a penny to their name, that come in and start demanding and, you know, clicking their fingers and treating it as a number or a role as opposed to a person, which I didn't really like. It was I hated it. Anyway, so then I arrived into Charleville Lodge in 2003, and now all of a sudden my boss was my mum and dad. So it was kind of like a lot more loose, and I could kind of start using logic in arguments with customers as opposed to saying, yes, sir, smiling and allowing the customer to always be right. So Mum and Dad have always kind of turned a blind eye to what I do online, because as long as kind of the cash is coming in, they're happy. And without a doubt, like since I started my social antics,
like that. We'll cut that out.
The business has been doing very, very well, and there's two reasons for what I do. And the first and foremost is to entertain people, because I think it's what I like doing, and I love receiving messages from followers saying, you know, I received a message from someone this morning saying, I started sea swimming because of you, you know, and I'm feeling the benefits of it. And then you have people saying, you know, in COVID, I was in a dark place, and I'd watch your Instagram, and I'd have a giggle to myself, and you'd brighten up my spirits and all this. I love that, and it's what makes me continue. But the second reason is obviously to create a few bob, to make a few bob for the family business, and that has happened. So so while mum and dad wouldn't always be great fans, well, and they're not even on. I mean, my dad isn't even on any social media, so he wouldn't have. It's usually kind of friends of his.
Mention it.
Yeah.
Did you see what he did?
I see, whatever. Yeah,
Even back in the day, it was like, I saw your man down the pub or whatever. I saw his Instagram the other day. Like,
yeah, and that's the way mum and dad usually find out about the stuff, believe it or not. Yeah. So yeah.
They slightly approve, if we'll say that then. So
as long as the revenue's coming in, they fucking love it. As far as
that's all. Yeah, that's all they really care about is.
And what's the big plans for the future for the whole brand? You have three businesses now. What's the next plans, or have you got anything planned?
So the plan with White Moose Cafe Limited is to create 20 cafes and then exit. But in the meantime, I've set up a company called White Moose Media Limited, which is obviously a media company, a marketing agency, if you like. And the main client of White Moose Media is White Moose Cafe. But in time, we will start taking on other clients. And I'm going to invest a lot of to be honest with you, I'd love to get to a point where, if Mary doesn't arrive into Swords on time, I kind of don't hear about it. Or if a toaster is broken down in English, I don't really need to have a phone call about it. Not that I'm too important for that, but it's just not really what I'm into. I don't really, media marketing is where my strengths lie, I think. And so while White Moose Cafe will always go on, we want to get to 20 cafes and exit, White Moose Media will be running concurrently, and that's where I'm going to focus an awful lot of my efforts now.
But I think that's
I'd like to have my own podcast, by the way. I'd like my own podcast.
I wouldn't ask us for any tips if I was you.
All right.
But I tell you what, in fairness, it's great to hear, because I think I might be coming from a marketing background. My fundamental opinion is that marketing has just gone boring. It's just fundamentally a boring place. And I think having, you do it through humor, performance, whatever way you want to do, the more of that stuff we have, because ultimately our world is just constantly saturated with media and marketing. I think the more entertainment that you get from that, really, it doesn't need to be entertainment. It can be deep storytelling. It can be just something that you can latch onto and go, yeah, that's something actually meaningful. I think the better off. And on that, you had, I was looking through your Instagram earlier on today, and I had to laugh at this. It's probably one of the funniest tweets actually which you posted on Instagram that I've ever seen in the last while anyway, which was that someone came up to me on Portmarnock Beach this morning and said, "Are you the guy from the Happy Moose Cafe?" I think she was mixing me up with the White Moose, or mixing up the White Moose Cafe with the Happy Pear. Never been so fucking offended in my life. I thought that was absolute genius.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one. All right.
That was good. Enjoyed it.
Not that I've anything against the two lads.
No, I was coming. There was context missing from that. The context was that you didn't fucking know them.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I'd have a huge amount of respect for the lads in what they've built for themselves. So yeah, but don't know them, so I can't. Look, you know what me and my
the lads are nice guys. They built a great brand.
Yeah, I would think so. And you know what? Anybody who has done anything like that, I'd have respect for. Even if they're vegans, I'd still have respect for them. I think Ireland is a nation of begrudgers, to be honest with you. And I think we're all, we love to see, we hate to see successful people do well, and we try and bring them back down to terra firma if we think they're getting a bit too big for their own boots. And that's one of the things I don't like about Ireland. successful people are demonized, and I don't like that. But no, never been to the Happy Pear, believe it or not.
We'll have to take a trip.
I've never been either. You met them. You went. We'll just actually end on this story. We were at so we both worked in consultancy for a sausage company before, and he didn't know that the two boys were vegan.
I didn't know anything about them.
You didn't know anything about them about years and years ago. And your man said, go over to them today with a bag of sausages. He went over to the bag of sausages, plonked them down on the Happy Bears. I can tell you, those are field lads from the lads over. You didn't fucking talk to you again.
Yeah, that was the end of that, yeah.
I'd love to have seen that.
It's happened a couple of times. In fairness, yeah. It was a good joke. But Paul, look, we want to say thanks very much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it, and we wish you nothing but success.
Very much.
We look forward to getting up and taking a trip up to the cafe hopefully soon.
Maybe, well, you never know. We might be.
We'll keep an eye on Instagram. Make sure you're there.
A very rare occurrence.
Take care. All the best.
Thanks a million. Okay, talk to you soon. All right.